Hello and welcome to the Red Zone, the tight end podcast. I'm Big Italy 42 here with Jason Gilbo at JGilbo11. Of course, you wrote up this comprehensive piece talking about some of your favorite plays and even some matchup grades there as well. So, going to be really nice to take advantage of not only the players themselves but good matchups. And at the top, we could probably just skip this segment most weeks where we just talk about Rob Gronkowski. He already had his bye week, so he's going to be here every week. It's just a matter of, if you choose to pay for him. People with their recency bias like to. He had a down game a couple weeks ago and came back with a huge game at low ownership. Last week, 4 for 47, but they didn't really need him to do anything in that game. He was a disappointment. He just wasn't necessary, I guess. So now this week, hopefully we get that low ownership once again, because this one, if the Giants can keep it close, which I think they should be able to be competitive and score some points, Gronk could be in line for a really big game.
Yeah, and we're kind of looking at like a similar thing with the Jets game a few weeks ago, because Julian Edelman's going to see plenty of Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie, who's been very solid this season, and you take him out, Gronk is going to get looks, and he saw 16 targets in that game, which was like a similar situation. The Giants have been torched by tight ends this season. Jordan Reed coming off a big game, Benjamin Watson, Charles Clay, Jason Witten. All tight ends who have just gone off against the Giants. So you give me Gronk in this matchup, double those lines for what those guys did for this week.
Yeah, and like you said in the article there, Hurricane Gronk, because it's when he gets going, it's not even close with him and the rest of the tight ends. But behind him, like you had kind of mentioned, this guy also, Jordan Reed, a guy that I won't say bailed everyone out last week at the end, but certainly helped raise his bottom line with that last second touchdown. He's facing off against a New Orleans team that, as we know, once again, since it's a year that ends with any number, they have a terrible defense, as usual. And Kirk Cousins last week was awful. Granted, that was against the Patriots, who aren't a great defense. They're a good defense, and they're a creative defense. The Saints are really none of those things, and they're just not very good. So they may plan to take Jordan Reed out of the game plan like New England did, but I can't imagine they're going to be as successful.
Yeah, I'm with you. New Orleans has just been awful. Awful. It has us contemplating Kirk Cousins in cash games this week. That's how bad they are. Yeah. It's ridiculous. Looking, Delaney Walker ran up and down the field against him. Yeah, he had some lucky bounces, but still, you take those out, he still would have had a solid game. Over the season, they've allowed 54 receptions, 725 yards, and 7 touchdowns to opposing tight ends. And they're dead last in tight end coverage. They're dead last in pass defense. I think for the price, Jordan Reed is one of my favorite points per dollar plays this week. I know he's not Gronk material, but for the price, he is a good look. And we were kind of talking earlier, me and Josh, about using a 2 tight end system on DraftKings this week, where you can get upside with Reed and Gronk.
Yeah, I don't mind that at all. Reed's got a really affordable price tag too, so it's almost like you're paying for Gronk, and Reed's just kind of a filler with some upside. Crockett Gillmore next up is a value play. Obviously, Steve Smith now. I don't want to call him a liar. He said he was going to be in his final season. He got hurt. Now he says he's going to come back. But none of that matters now. All that matters is all that production that went his way has to go somewhere else. Gilmore was already having a fairly productive season when he was on the field. Had some injury concerns himself. But Gilmore's the guy that he's not a tremendous athlete by any means, but he's big. He's got good hands. And Joe Flacco really has no one else to throw the ball to in the red zone. So by all those just kind of defaults, Crockett Gillmore makes for a pretty nice play at his price this week.
Yeah, especially on DraftKings, 2,800. He's still pretty cheap on FanDuel as well, but it's weird. There's not a lot of value tight ends this week, and there probably doesn't need to be, just because there's so much value elsewhere, especially at running back. Sub 3,000 on DK. If you're looking to just punt the spot and hope for, four reception, 50 lines, and hopefully a touchdown, Crockett Gillmore can give you that. Jacksonville ranks 20th against tight ends. Flacco really has no other options, especially in the red zone, unless he's just going to try and sneak it in each time, like he's been trying to do the past couple of weeks.
Joe Flacco, the ultimate goal line vulture. He wants to be Cam Newton when he grows up, I guess. I don't know. He just... And he doesn't look good doing it either. It's kind of a fall forward and hope the ball's past the line. But, Joe Flacco can't be doing that forever, hopefully. And Crockett Gillmore, he's a tough cover with that short amount of field. He's such a big target. So here's hoping that he throws the ball at the 1 yard line this week. Or if you have Justin Forsett, maybe he hands it off. But that's a different story. GPP plays, you got Greg Olsen here, as we know. And Greg Olsen, you mentioned some really big numbers here. 37% of the red zone targets for Carolina. A lot of those also, not target-wise, but a lot of the calls go into Cam Newton there as well. So when you get down in the red zone, I mean, it's Greg Olsen through the air or it's Cam Newton on the ground. And Tennessee's playing at a really slow pace. It's almost like they're the Miami Heat of the NFL, and their pace. Well, I mean, the number of plays per game in their games are incredibly low. But Greg Olsen is still the focal point of this passing attack when the Panthers are actually throwing the ball. So we know he has big upside. He also has a low floor in games where they don't need him, which is probably why you've got him in GBP here. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, just because we've seen that low floor, and I've kind of learned the hard way where I've had him in cash games before, and coming off big weeks where you think he's going to be consistent, he just hasn't been. Yeah. I mean, the targets are consistent. That's the thing I like. But Newton, like you mentioned, he just bowling balls into the end zone in the red zone there. So that kind of takes away from the consistency for Olsen. But I mean, he's going to get looks. I mean, 8.6 targets per game. I mean, that's Gronk numbers right there. I mean, they're top 2 in the league for tight ends. So Tennessee hasn't been great against tight ends. But I mean, looking for a GPP option, I think Olsen's got a pretty good ceiling.
Yeah, and speaking of ceiling, your favorite and my favorite tight end for his past team and current team, you being a Notre Dame fan, me being a Bengals fan, Tyler Eifert is doing his best Rob Gronkowski impression this year. He's got 2 games with 2 touchdowns, a game with 3 touchdowns last week. I mean, he's looked virtually uncoverable down the field. Really, I mean, the games where he hasn't had success are when Bengals were just spreading the ball around because they do have other options. So that's really the only negative there. But against Houston, you got to imagine that the Bengals are still going to have some success through the air. And, I mean, Eifert, has one of the better ceilings of any tight end.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, they're going to put up a ton of points this game. But, I mean, looking at the red zone numbers there, AJ Green, 31% of the targets, Eifert, 27%. But there just doesn't seem to be enough to go around each week because there's so many options. I mean, it's AJ Green one week, it's Eifert the next. So that's why he's kind of a GPP play for me. But, I mean, they sit right behind the Packers and the Patriots as projected team totals this week. I think, they're probably not sneaky just because Bengals have been so consistent this season. But if you're looking to kind of pivot off a Gronk, a Gronk Brady thing and Dalton Eifert, I kind of like that move a lot this week.
Yeah, Eifert, if you ask me, maybe the second coming of Rob Gronkowski anyway, now that he's finally healthy. He's well on his way, and there's still some of that bias, and I try not to dig too much into it myself and the fact that the Bengals were so used to them letting people down and not being consistent, but finally being healthy, I can't look away. Gary Barnidge, another guy, similar to Crockett Gillmore, except slightly more talented. Looks like the kind of guy that's going to come and chop down a tree in your backyard for you by hand. But despite the fact that he looks like Paul Bunyan and is just an enormous guy, he makes incredible catches, like you mentioned here. He caught a ball with his knees, catching balls with his feet. The guy does everything. And Josh McCown, hopefully he's back because that's definitely a big plus for Gary Barnidge. But he's still the main target. You look at the other targets they have, and it's nothing. You could say names, but none of them are reliable targets outside of Gary Barnidge.
No, especially in the red zone where I know Cleveland doesn't make it down there that much, being Cleveland, but he's still logging 27% for targets there. The next receiver logging red zone targets is Brian Hartline. So that kind of just shows you, that offense right there. But if McCown's back, he's put up some big weeks, and I think Barnidge would be the big beneficiary from that one.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. He's the guy out getting some GPPs as well. All right, that's going to wrap things up for us here for this week. Find us on Twitter at DF Cafe, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and check out the rest of our great content at dailyfantasycafe.com.